Well, I'm joined today by Rachel Lockett. Rachel has over 20 years in technology leadership and was the first chief information officer of Polad Companies. And last year, in 2023, published her first book, which I have right here, The Technology Doesn't Matter, Prioritizing People in IT Business Alignment, which I had such a pleasure reading in anticipation of our conversation today. So, Rachel, congrats on
Thank
the
you.
book. Thank you for
Thank you.
writing it. And thank you so much for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we dive in, I really do want to talk about the book today. Do you mind
Okay.
walking me through your background? How did you get into technology?
Oh, sure. Well, that's a good question because in high school I was determined to be an actress, and was all I did throughout high school. I was in all of the school productions, and then was accepted to three different theater departments for college. And then at the last minute, the end of my senior year, I decided that I wanted to do something a little more practical. That I might want to, live in a house and drive a car and eat food someday. So I took a look back and said, well, what else am I good at besides this acting thing? And I realized that even though I spent all of my time in high school down in like the English and creative writing wing of the school, I was always helping the teachers figure out how to use the computers. And one of my drama directors, she was also one of my English teachers. I was her, what did they like? They called it a teacher's aide or whatever, teacher's assistant, during my study hall. And I would go in and actually she had me teach her class how to use the computers because she was required to have them use the PC for writing their research papers, and she didn't want to touch it. So I taught her class how to use the computer. So that's when I said maybe this IT thing I could give that a shot, and never looked back, and haven't regretted it for a minute. I think it's going pretty well so far.
That's awesome. Well, not that you wouldn't have been a great actress, but I think, yeah, like you said, you've done well by this pursuit. So that's really awesome. For people who are not in technology, what is a chief information officer?
So it can vary widely across organizations. Typically, it's the person with strategic responsibility and leadership at the executive level for all of the technology that runs the business. And I like to say every business is a whole bunch of processes that work together to accomplish what needs to be done. Well, IT is also a whole bunch of processes that work together to support the business in doing what needs to be done. And so the CIO is over all of that. And in some organizations, that includes customer facing technology. Sometimes that's separated off, and that might be called the chief technology officer. In some businesses, that includes and entails all of the information security. In others, that's separated off and falls somewhere else. But almost always, it means the responsibility for leading the technology team, the people, infrastructure, help desk support, application development, all those things to make the business go, whether it's the back end software and technology systems, or if it's also customer facing technology.
That's awesome. So a lot under that umbrella. I
Uh,
take for granted that we know a lot of this lingo and a lot of people listening don't. So thank you for sharing that. Before we dive into the meat of the book, I would love to know more about the process of writing and publishing it for people who, like myself, have always thought, oh, I'd love to write a book, but
yeah.
scared because, there's a lot that probably goes into it. What is it that you learned and maybe what would you do differently for the next one?
Well, I'll tell you, I learned a lot from other people who had already written a book. So if you're interested or anyone else out there, talk to people who've already done it. And some of the best advice I got was from a friend of mine named Deb, who had already published a book of her own. And she explained to me that there is actually a formula, a template, if you will, for writing a business book. And I had already heard horror stories from other people who had written a book and they had poured their heart and soul into, their magnum opus. And then they turn it over to a publisher, and the publisher hacks it apart and, tears it up and puts it back together in a different order and just, destroys their original vision. Well, I didn't want that to happen. So I said, I'm going to follow this template. I'm going to follow this formula to a T and make my life a lot easier. And it really did. So I followed the formula, and I also talked to people who had worked with publishers, and I learned about a good publisher. I got a referral to a good publisher. I looked on their website and found out the format that they wanted your book proposal to be in, and what information they wanted. So I prepared all of that ahead of time. And I'd also heard of people who shop their book around to multiple publishers and get rejection after rejection before someone finally picks it up. But I think because I had done all my homework and learned and followed the process, I sent my book proposal the first time to the first publisher, and they replied back, a day or so later with a contract. It was so much easier. And then I explained to them on the first meeting, I said, look, I already researched and learned about this format, this template for a business book, and I followed it. And they said, thank you. You just saved us all a lot of time. And so as I went through the publishing process, there were times, so they'll chunk your book up into chapters, and they'll make their proposed edits, and then they'll send it back to the author. And you do this in 3 rounds. You do this 3 times. There were times that in certain rounds of edits, they would reach out to me and say, we don't actually have any edits for this chapter. Do you even want to see it and approve it? And well, no, I guess not. So we just skip to the next step. So I really did save myself and the publisher a lot of time by following that template. So I always tell people, if you're thinking about writing a business book, come talk to me. I will share that formula because it was spot on.
Well, good for you for doing your research. I bet that's probably what intimidates so many people, right? It's funny. It's hard enough to write, but imagining all the other components that go into it. But to your point, if you follow that and then you get to the place where you are at a point of publishing, it's a lot smoother ride. Yeah. So, diving into the book itself, chapter 5 was my absolute favorite. I loved it.
Mine too. Mine too. They're not my children, so I can have a favorite chapter of my book.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because there's 2 things I want to talk about in it. But the first one, you reference a study by Dr. Ronnie Jia and looking at gender and how there's an imbalance largely in the IT field as compared to other fields. And he highlights the prevalence of autism and people with autistic tendencies in this space. I'd love to know more about your own experience in technology and how your experience correlates to the findings of the study.
Sure. Well, when I first ran across the research and I read the results of his research and his study, it was a weird thing because on one hand, I was so surprised and like, oh my gosh, the light bulb went off. And then at the same time, I went, but duh, because it completely reinforces the experience I've had for 25 years, both personally with members of my family and with the teams that I've led. Dr. Jia's research and chapter 5 of my book, neither one are saying that everyone in IT is autistic. What it's saying is there is a higher prevalence of autistic tendencies in people who also have an interest in technology and then thereby pursue technology as a career. And so what that means is in any given IT department, you're just going to have more of those traits, of those characteristics, maybe not from every person, but from more people than what you would see in a typical sales and marketing department or, any other department in the company. We've all heard the stereotypes, right? And they're, Dilbert and the Big Bang Theory and all the different sort of public perceptions of IT people. Well, that comes from somewhere. And Dr. Jia did the research to prove where it comes from, to prove that there is actually a correlation between those things. And then to me, it's fascinating to explore what that means and especially how that applies to the gender gap that we experience in IT.
Yeah. And do you think that there is a correlation that's the reason why there's a higher dropout rate of women in IT as a field as compared to other fields?
Yeah, I think it explains why there's lower interest to begin with, why there are fewer women who even have that interest in technology at the very early stages, elementary school stage. Again, it's potentially because of these neurological differences. The thing we didn't mention yet is that autism spectrum disorder, and I think this applies to other things as well. It's not just purely people with an autism diagnosis, but it may also correlate with ADHD and things like that. But it is diagnosed, autism spectrum disorder is diagnosed 5 times more often in boys than it is in girls. Now, there's a whole other conversation to be had about women being underdiagnosed and misdiagnosed, and that's all very well and true. And believe me, I could talk about that for days too. But the male presentation of autism spectrum disorder is the one that presents those characteristics that I'm talking about in the book and that Dr. Jia was looking for in his research. The characteristics are things like struggling with interpersonal communication, wanting to dive in really deep into details of things that they're interested in, distractions becoming complete derailments instead of just a brief distraction like they would for neurotypical people. And then just that inability to pick up on social cues and that struggle with building relationships with other people, especially more neurotypical people. And so if that neurological difference between boys and girls, also one of the other presentations of it is a greater interest in technology. That means that right from the beginning, we're going to have more boys pursuing technology from the very beginning. But your point there, your question is actually getting to something that's even more interesting to me, because I think it also explains the fallout that we have. Women leave technology careers at a much higher rate than men as well. And I think part of the reason for that is because if you have a group of people, whether it's a coding club in elementary school or middle school, or it's a technology class in high school, or it's, actually pursuing technology as a major in college, or even entry-level IT departments, anywhere along that line, if you have a group of people that are exhibiting a higher frequency of those autistic tendencies, specifically not great at interpersonal communication, not great at picking up on social cues, wanting to dive into really deep detail on technical issue or technical concepts, and just that struggle with building relationships, that is going to create an environment that is seen as less inclusive. It's going to be less warm and fuzzy. It's going to be bit more difficult to make friends and feel like you belong there. And so if we have women and girls who, whether they have autistic tendencies themselves or not, they're more likely to be looking for that inclusion and that sense of belonging, and they're not able to find it with the IT crowd, they're going to go look for it with the philosophy majors, because those people are fun and interesting, and they're going to make them feel welcome and feel included, or the marketing department, or whatever that might be. And so I think it really does explain the fallout that we have all throughout the career in IT, all the way up to the executive level. So it's starting at the beginning. It explains that higher rate of interest in boys, and then it explains why men and boys might be more willing to stick with the technology career, and women might drop out.
I agree with you. I was a lit major, so I understood which camp I fell in, but
You get it. I was almost there too.
You mentioned creating, with companies having their diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, welcoming neurodiversity as part of that programming.
Yeah.
How do you cultivate a sense of belonging for both the neurodivergent as well as the neurotypical? I think belonging is a really challenging, cultural peak to arrive at. How do you
Yeah.
cultivate, as a leader, belonging for your teams?
Yeah. And that's the goal. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do by bringing attention to this, by writing chapter 5, by speaking about this, is to bring awareness, because I do think that is the first step. It's understanding and awareness. A lot of times in the business world, in a company, that IT group, people can tell they're different, right? Again, the stereotype comes from somewhere. And I think that in the business world, the way that plays out is it's a lot more difficult to build those trusting business relationships, and to relate to one another, and to communicate effectively. And so that sometimes results in, we talk a lot about IT getting left out of the conversation until the decision has been made, and then we're just asked to implement it. And that struggle to get that seat at the executive table, that's for the higher level career. And so I think that plays out in that inability to form those relationships and work together effectively, which ultimately impairs the ability to create IT business alignment. So I want to bring greater awareness, both for the technologists and for the business leaders, so that they can understand that thing you're perceiving as being different, and maybe being difficult to communicate with, hard to talk to, hard to understand, tedious, boring, aloof, maybe even arrogant. That's not what you think it is. There's a neurological difference behind that. There's actually a reason for that. And that awareness can then lead to some compassion and understanding, and then ultimately to some changed behaviors to help make it easier to interact and to work together. And part of it might be creating a different work environment, creating a work environment that's more conducive to the way that those stereotypical IT people want to work, allowing more of the heads down focus time and less distraction. But it really does all start with awareness, and then we can lead to changed behaviors to help make an environment that's more productive and conducive, and gives a greater sense of belonging and engagement for the employee.
Well, I appreciate that. I think 2020 and a lot of us going remote, it became a real source of sanctity that they got a chance to
Yeah.
work in an environment that allowed for limited distraction, more heads down, as you described. And I hear time and time again
Mhm.
how many people are so grateful that remote has been embraced in a lot of ways and still is hopefully going to continue to remain that way because it supports their work habits. So I really
Right.
appreciated that in this chapter. Another component about this chapter that I loved is a question that you posed to candidates. I thought this was a phenomenal interview question. What is the last thing that you learned? So, Rachel, what is the last thing that you learned?
Well, I'm going to give you two things, one on more of a technology side and one not so much. So I've had some extra time at home lately and took on a project. I wanted to refinish a bookcase. I had this bookcase that was just in, it was really sturdy and it also had some sentimental value. It was the first thing I put into the nursery before my first child. So 20 years ago now. But it was all scratched up and there was rings on the top and stuff and it really needed to be refinished. And so, um, the internet, YouTube videos, blogs, there's so many people out there that can't wait to tell you about their project that they did. And so I learned how to refinish this bookcase and I am so thrilled with the final result. I just put it in the place where it's going to live permanently now and filled it with books and it looks so cute and I'm just so
Good
proud of
for
myself.
you. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. And then the other thing, I am trying to learn more about a particular large ERP platform and environment. And so I reached out to a colleague, a very trusted friend and advisor for many years, and just said, "Hey, I know your company does these large implementations. Is there anyone that I can talk to?" So I have lunch scheduled for Thursday, and I'm going to sit down and just learn more about the ecosystem and the environment of this large ERP platform that I haven't had the joy of working with yet. So those are
Awesome.
my two those are my two stories. But I love to learn, and I'll even add to it. We were driving up to our cabin this weekend, and I picked up a book I've been wanting to get to reading, and the long drive was the perfect opportunity. And I just asked my husband, "Do you want me to read this to you?" So I'm reading it out loud. It's about artificial intelligence. It's called The New Automation Mindset. I should have remembered the author's name so I could give him credit, but The New Automation Mindset. And so I'm reading it out loud to my husband. And every time I would finish a little section or a little subchapter, I'd stop and we'd talk about it a little bit because we both love learning. And gosh, there's so much to learn right now about artificial intelligence. And, you know, you blink for 5 minutes and you'll be out of date. So you got to stay caught up. So I love to learn and I love to talk to people who also love to learn. What about you, Lauren? What's the last thing you learned?
Well, right now I'm reading a book called World Without Mind. It's by Franklin Fowler. It's very unsettling. It's a
Oh,
critique of Silicon Valley and how these big tech companies have altered our whole way of living, economically, politically, socially. It's disturbing, and also
uh-oh.
there's something I know there's something sort of refreshing about having an expose of this nature because we tend to just adopt and move forward with the new latest and greatest. And
Yeah.
last week I had a guest go into tremendous detail, Paul Robinson, about cybersecurity and how it influences our life. So I feel between that conversation I had with Paul and this book, I'm learning a lot about how vulnerable we really are as a
Mm,
society, as individuals, and to to take pause, as Paul says, to take pause before accepting a user license agreement or
yeah.
questioning our behavior, because I think we do tend to trust in the systems, and sometimes those systems fail.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Well
not
said.
to be bleak, but I
Very
think,
interesting. Yeah.
but
Thank
great,
you.
great read.
Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Of course. Well, as we go into this new year and in talking about, you mentioned you love to learn. You love self-improvement. The first time we talked, I remember being so drawn by how much you had transformed yourself personally and how you continue to push yourself professionally. And in light of this new year, what awaits for you? What's the next
Mhm.
reinvention?
Well, I am hoping to find my next adventure. So, after 10 years with the Polad companies, that wonderful adventure ended in December. So, I'm looking for my next adventure and can't wait to find out what that's going to be. And beyond that, I hope to do more, sharing these kind of messages and these kind of stories, more public speaking, more engagement with this amazing, vibrant technology community that we have here in the Twin Cities. And also I have some opportunities to engage with the national community. And so, yeah, continuing along that line. And also I'll have a daughter graduate high school. And so helping her figure out her next adventure will be a great joy for me. We've done a ton of college visits, and she's kind of now at the point where she needs to make a decision and decide what her next stage will be. And that's so much fun as a parent to help them be part of that process and just see all of the excitement and the potential. And I think we love going to grad parties and graduations and talking to these kids because they have limitless opportunities available in front of them. All the doors are open at this point, right? And they just get to choose, which one is going to be right for them. So that's a lot of fun. I feel a bit of that myself right now too.
I was going to say, I think this is something a lot of people are going through. 2023 was an extremely difficult year for a lot of people. 2024 is shaping up to similarly have, for lack of a better way of saying it, a bumpy start. And I'm curious, how have you embraced the journey, this journey of looking for the next adventure? What have you found fills your bucket in the process?
Well, discussions with people like you are the biggest thing. I think every time I talk to you, I always tell you, thank you for the bucket filling conversation. I didn't always love networking, but over the last several years, I knew I had gotten to be better at it and had learned to enjoy it. I can tell you, it is so much more fun when you don't have to fit networking in between a regular 9-to-5 job. When that becomes your job, it's been really fun. I can just kind of relax and enjoy it. And so I think that that's one thing, is just sort of relaxing and enjoying the process. The other thing that makes the process enjoyable for me is just that idea that I get to choose, I get to sort of help create it. As I'm looking at some opportunities, they're the kind of thing where you get the opportunity to craft it a little bit. And that's always fun. That's what I got to do with my last role, was I got to write the job description. And so things that are a little bit more ambiguous and open-ended are appealing to me, because that means I can be part of crafting that. So that's enjoyable as well. But really just being able to have great conversations with wonderful people who are uplifting and energetic. And the cool thing is, people that are out there trying to network, those are those kind of people. Like if I have to beg someone to come and have lunch with me, that's not their thing, and that's okay. But the people who are excited about getting together and chatting and having coffee or going to lunch, they're the same bucket filling, energetic, positive, optimistic kind of people.
That's great. Well, I'm so glad that one, you're in my orbit, and two, that you're in the orbit of so many others who are lifting you up, because it can be such a difficult journey. Looking for a job sucks. Everyone knows it. But if you, like to your point, if you lean into the idea of being a craftsman through that process and embracing the people that have that vibrancy and great energy and great ideas. And I don't, ever since I was a little girl, my father said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think this year and last year proved that to be more true than ever, that we're on a journey of being connected to real people. Networking doesn't have to be gross. So I love that you're embracing it and finding the real joy in it, because it can be so challenging. And like I said, thank you again for writing this book. I loved reading it. I had no idea what it was like, having never been in a technology seat, the challenges that are faced, where there is at times this feeling of not having a seat at the table. And then to your point, building culture, what does that mean? And how do you build it for, not your neurotypical individual? And so you highlighted a lot of really beautiful, and I felt very important points in this book. So my last question today, is there a second book on the horizon?
Absolutely. It's already in my head. It's just a matter of when, and I need to gather a few more stories. So I hope this next adventure will give me a few more chapters to add. But I do want the next book to be a little bit more personal in nature, a little bit more about my experience as a woman in technology. And I want to share the stories of many people, not just women, but everyone who has overcome a challenge or learned something along the way in order to reach their potential. So that's the angle for the second book.
Well, I can't wait to read it. So, thank you again for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations. I'm so excited to see where this next chapter and this adventure takes you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was fun.